I'm becoming a fangirl of Arthur Brooks. He's the head of the American Enterprise Institute. He's made some really fabulous videos, and came out with an article this week that was on New York Times, and it was the trick to being more virtuous. And I really love the fact that conservatives and libertarians are starting to talk more about morality and virtue and bringing that into public discussions, because conservatism is far more than just a political party or politics or anything that has to do with the laws that govern our society. Conservatism is it's a way of life. It's who you are. And Arthur Brooks relates the story of having been in Utah delivering a lecture at Brigham Young University, and one of the things that the Mormons did was they gave him lots of logoed merchandise for BYU, and he was walking around with a briefcase with the BYU logo on it. And what he noticed was, absolutely unconsciously, when he was carrying that briefcase, he was on a subconscious level aware that he was representing the Mormon way of life in some way, because he was advertising BYU. He behaved better. He was nicer. He smiled more. He even went so far as being aware of when he was walking around with a coffee cup along with that BYU briefcase, because Mormons don't drink coffee. And he then kind of realized that this Mormon briefcase and what it meant to him had an effect of moral elevation on him. And then he also noticed that it affected other people around him. And the phenomenon of moral elevation is such that the way you behave and what you reflect out onto society, other people will reflect back to you. And if you stand up straight and you look at strangers in the eye, make eye contact and smile with strangers, they're going to smile back, and they're going to carry that happiness for another 15 seconds. Or you are seen visibly putting up a couple of, not only your own grocery cart at Kroger, but somebody else's grocery cart. Somebody else is going to see you do that, and maybe 3 days later, they'll be in a position that they can put away a couple of grocery carts. They're going to do so. And you're sort of spreading this moral elevation of kindness and generosity of spirit like a virus throughout the world. And that's something that I don't know that we think about doing consciously as often as we possibly should. And I loved the fact that this article was out there and kind of gave it a name of moral elevation. So now we can all kind of look at it and come up with more examples of doing that, and be more conscious of spreading conservatism, not by talking politics, but by our actions of just being happy, good, decent people. That's kind of where I'm at. In this article by Arthur Brooks, he focused on, after telling his story of his briefcase, he talked about bringing a bit more civility to our political culture. But what he said before going into that was, we can be the passive beneficiaries of moral elevation, which he was, by having, that briefcase elevated him morally. But we can actively pursue it as well by rejecting bad influences and seeking good ones. And that's what we do in our private lives, and we can, and that's what we want our children to do. Don't we all understand, when you're raising your children, you encourage them to have good friends rather than bad friends, and have friends that will elevate them, and that they can then elevate their friends. And we then somehow forget that when we grow up, and we hang out with the bad crowd of people who are amoral, and we excuse that. We need to remember the things that we teach our children about, you are who your friends are, and you need to behave properly and mind your manners and treat people decently. We need to do that our whole lives, because that then makes, not only does it make ourselves happier and better, it makes other people step up to our level. Why would I sink down to their level of a lack of civility and lack of manners and lack of respect? I'm going to behave in such a way that they will rise up to my level, kind of thing, is what I'm looking at. And we're seeing examples of that in Ferguson. There have actually been a couple of examples. The Natalie Durose, the cakes lady. You guys know more about that than I do. Natalie, what's her face in Ferguson, that made the cakes, and there was the GoFundMe. Natalie Dubose. And there was the GoFundMe, and she's made tons of money, and she's getting a lot of press. And what Felicia was telling me earlier is that because Natalie has done well enough on this thing that she's going to rebuild her own, she is sharing with the other residents and business people of Ferguson, and she's spreading the mentality and the spirit of rebuild and do good things and be a positive influence on each other. And that's moral elevation, and that's the kind of thing that goes beyond party politics. It goes beyond race. It goes beyond so many things into the kind of society we want to live in.
Focus on this one thing, like say the medical device tax, get public support for it, get rid of it, claim success, have a party, and then move on to the next thing.